Have you ever noticed that some people, days or weeks before they pass away, start to act differently, as if they know something important is about to happen? We're not talking about obvious illnesses or medical diagnoses. We're talking about subtle signs, behaviors that seem too small to call attention to, but which, after their death, seem to take on a new significance. Dolores Cannon, who studied hundreds of cases in deep regressive hypnosis sessions, believed that the soul possesses a type of awareness beyond time, and that it is capable of preparing the body and mind for departure even before anything happens on the physical plane. The question that arises is simple and disturbing. Does our soul know when it's going to die? And if it does, how does this manifest in our daily lives? What changes in the behavior of someone who is, even without consciously knowing it, saying goodbye to life as we know it? In many cases analyzed by Cannon, patterns emerged that repeated so frequently that they seemed almost predictable. Certain people began to put things in order, to clean out drawers, organize documents, review old photographs, and even talk to family members about topics they had never touched on before. It's as if an invisible part of the being is on alert, guiding simple gestures that go unnoticed by those who observe. The soul, according to Cannon, not only has awareness of the end, but acts subtly to ease its arrival. This may seem strange at first glance, but the more you listen to these stories, the more you begin to see meaning in these patterns. If you're enjoying this reflection, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. That way you help us continue bringing deep topics with responsibility and clarity. One of the most curious behaviors reported by family members is the sudden change in the mood of the person about to die. Someone who was anxious may become calm. Someone who used to worry starts smiling more often. In some cases, this inner peace appears days before an unexpected departure. Dolores Cannon used to say that this type of sudden serenity doesn't come about by chance. For her, it's the soul accepting the cycle, recognizing that the time of the material is coming to an end. It's not resignation, it's silent understanding. The body may not know, but the soul does, and it transmits this certainty through a lightness that intrigues those around. Many only realize how significant this was after the loss happens. The question comes back with force: did they know? Another recurring point in the reports is the sense of urgency that some people develop before they die. It's as if time takes on another weight. There's a rush to call someone far away, to visit memorable places, to apologize, or to say words that have been kept silent for years. Sometimes this is accompanied by phrases like, "I need to take care of this soon," or "I don't want to leave anything unfinished." Dolores observed that these impulses didn't come from rational logic, but from something deeper. The soul, according to her, was already aware of the approaching departure, even if the body was apparently fine. It's as if this awareness triggers a kind of emotional checklist, guiding the person to complete important pending matters before crossing the next stage of existence. There are also reports of very vivid dreams shortly before death. People who, days before passing, dream of deceased family members, parents, grandparents, or distant friends. In some cases, they say that they were visited by these presences and wake up with a strange sense of tranquility. Dolores Cannon believed that in these dreams there were true spiritual encounters, moments of preparation where the soul received guidance or comfort. For her, this was one of the clearest signs that something was approaching. Not as a tragic warning, but as a loving preparation. The soul doesn't fear the end, it understands the process, and these dreamlike encounters would then be ways for the soul to soften the impact of the transition, both for those who are going and for those who remain. There is also the behavior of unexpected giving. People who start distributing beloved objects, favorite clothes, personal memories. Sometimes they say, "This will do you good," or "I want you to have this." Even without consciously knowing that death is approaching, something inside them seems to want to leave parts of themselves scattered among those who remain. Dolores Cannon interpreted these gestures as acts of love coming directly from the soul. Small legacies left with affection, as if each donated object were a silent farewell. It's not about common detachment, but about an internal impulse that doesn't need to be explained. Those who have gone through this with someone close know how much these small gifts after their departure become symbols of something greater. Another behavior that appears frequently is sudden isolation. Sociable people who from one moment to the next start to desire more silence, more time alone, avoiding meetings or parties. Sometimes they say they're tired or that they need time for themselves. Dolores Cannon observed that this detachment wasn't depression or discouragement, but an unconscious preparation. The soul, according to her, begins to disconnect gently from material reality, as if gathering its ties to facilitate the transition. This movement can cause strangeness in family members, but after the loss happens, many recognize that this silence had a purpose. It was a discreet goodbye, a subtle step towards the invisible. And the most impressive thing is how these changes, even small ones, seem to follow a silent script. Dolores Cannon also reported that many people demonstrated a kind of sparkle in their eyes in the days leading up to death. It may seem too poetic at first glance, but several family members describe this sparkle as something real, as if the person were different. Some say they looked younger, others that there was a serene light in their eyes. Cannon believed that this was a reflection of a soul that was already partially aware of the reunion with something greater. This awareness brought peace, even without logical explanation. The body was still walking among the living, but the soul was already touching the edge of another existence. And this sparkle was the manifestation of this connection. It's a phenomenon that's difficult to describe, but common enough to have been noted in many stories around the world. In several cases, those who are close to death begin to speak with a wisdom that they didn't demonstrate before. Deep phrases, simple reflections, but full of meaning. Sometimes they tell stories that they had never shared or reveal regrets with surprising honesty. Dolores Cannon said that this was part of the soul's release. When the end approaches, even if no one knows for sure, what is kept inside begins to come out. Not by chance, but out of necessity. It's as if the soul needs to express itself, relieve itself, clarify itself. This doesn't happen to everyone, but when it does, it deeply marks those who listen. Speech becomes lighter, more sincere, as if each word had weight. It is the spirit saying goodbye, even without knowing that this may be its last dialogue with the physical world. There are also those who manifest a different perception of time. The notion of past and future seems to lose strength. The person lives more in the present, in the small things, in the details of the now. Dolores Cannon believed that this wasn't distraction, but a sign of alignment with the spiritual plane. When the soul is about to leave the body, it connects to the present moment in a more intense way. This can be perceived in simple gestures, contemplating the sky, observing a flower, listening to music more attentively. It's as if time slows down, allowing the soul to calmly absorb the last moments of physical experience. Those who witness this behavior usually notice something different, even without understanding, and only later do they realize that it had a deeper meaning than it seemed. In some situations, the person feels like revisiting memorable places in life. It may be the house where they were born, the school where they studied, a park bench where they used to sit. Dolores Cannon understood this as a gesture of reconciliation of the soul with its trajectory. By returning to these points, the soul remembers, recognizes, gives thanks. It is a kind of silent farewell. Often, this desire arises for no clear reason. The person simply says that they want to pass by a place, see a landscape, touch a tree. There is no apparent logical reason, but there is an internal impulse that guides this movement. The soul seems to want to close a cycle with lightness, reconnect with what has been lived before moving on. For those who observe, these gestures gain value when seen in light of the departure. There are cases in which the person has a last important conversation with someone from the past. Sometimes it's a phone call after years of silence. Other times it's an unexpected visit. Dolores Cannon said that this type of reunion has a spiritual purpose. The soul seeks to resolve what was left open, even briefly. It's not about apologizing or making peace only. It's about closing a chapter with dignity. This last conversation may not seem significant at the time, but it proves essential when death happens soon after. It's as if the soul knew that it needed this closure. Every word said there takes on another weight, and those who participate in this conversation often feel that something changed at that moment. A cycle was closed. The most intriguing thing about all these behaviors is that they don't arise from a rational logic. It's not as if the person is consciously aware that they are going to die, planning each gesture as part of a rehearsed farewell. On the contrary, in most cases, they don't even suspect that death is near. It's as if there are two levels operating at the same time: the conscious one, which goes about life normally, and the spiritual one, which is already aware of what is to come. Dolores Cannon dedicated decades to studying these two levels. In her regressions, many reported inexplicable sensations of preparation, as if something invisible was guiding them in their final moments. These accounts were repeated with surprising precision, coming from different people, with different cultures and beliefs, which only reinforced the idea that there is a consciousness beyond reason. Dolores affirmed that the soul is multidimensional and is not limited to linear time as we perceive it. For her, the soul already knows, even before birth, when its departure will be. This doesn't mean that everything is rigidly predetermined, but that there are defined milestones on the spiritual journey. Death would be one of these milestones, and the soul, aware of this, prepares the ground even if the mind doesn't understand. This preparation is not always the same. Each person experiences this moment uniquely, with their own signs, but the patterns are there, subtle and consistent. The body begins to slow down, behavior transforms, and the ties with the physical world are gently loosened. It's not something scary. On the contrary, it's like a natural process that occurs with a harmony that is often only perceived afterward. Even in cases of sudden deaths, accidents, or unexpected situations, Dolores Cannon believed that the soul had already prepared itself on some level. She told stories of people who, a few days before tragic events, demonstrated behaviors strangely aligned with a farewell. A woman who decided to write letters to her family for no reason. A man who donated all the books he loved and began to contemplate the sunset in silence. These attitudes only seemed curious at the time, but gained another meaning after their departure. According to Dolores, there are no coincidences when it comes to the soul. Even what seems sudden or absurd to us has an order in the spiritual plane. And this order is revealed in the small details, in the silent gestures, in the impulses that seem without explanation and yet carry profound meanings. Families who have experienced these situations often report a feeling of peace when they realize, afterward, that perhaps the person really knew, not with words, but with actions, and this perception helps to ease the pain of loss. Dolores Cannon used to say that when we understand that the soul participates in its own farewell, something changes in our relationship with death. It ceases to be an abrupt cut and becomes a guided transition. This doesn't eliminate suffering, but it offers a broader understanding, a silent solace that comes from the idea that nothing was interrupted without meaning. Life followed a course, and in the end, the soul was conscious and active. This understanding, even if it comes late, transforms the way we look at existence and what lies beyond it. This view also invites us to pay more attention to the people around us. When a relative or friend starts acting unusually, perhaps it's time to listen more attentively. Not to try to avoid something inevitable, but to be present, to perceive the signs that often are silent requests for presence, for affection, for listening. The soul, according to Dolores, communicates through paths that don't involve words, and those who live with someone in their last moments can be touched by this invisible language. It's not necessary to understand everything rationally. Just be open, attentive, available. Many farewells happen without us realizing it, but when we look with attentive eyes, we can recognize the signs and transform the goodbye into a true encounter. Each of these stories, these behaviors, these observations, takes us back to the initial question: does the soul know when it's going to die? And the answer, although not definitive, seems to point to a silent yes. Dolores Cannon didn't seek to impose a truth, but to open space for deeper reflections. She believed that if we look more carefully, with more sensitivity, we will perceive that the soul leaves traces before departing. Traces that are confused with everyday gestures, but that reveal an ancestral wisdom. Knowing how to recognize these signs doesn't change the end, but it transforms the way we deal with it. It's a way of giving meaning to loss, of welcoming death as part of life, and of continuing even after departure, in dialogue with that which never ceased to be alive. When we observe the accounts of so many people who have gone through unexpected farewells, we begin to notice that there is a common thread linking all these experiences. No matter the age, the place, or the belief, the presence of these behaviors seems to indicate that there is something beyond simple coincidence. Dolores Cannon believed that the soul leaves vestiges before departing, as if it were trying to organize, harmonize, cleanse the ground for what comes next. This leads us to reflect on how we are living and how we are preparing ourselves, even without knowing it, for the hour of departure. Perhaps we are not as in the dark as we imagine. Perhaps there is within us a silent wisdom that knows more than we can express in words, a wisdom that acts at the right time even when our mind doesn't yet understand. These signs that precede death should not be seen as something scary. They don't announce a tragedy, but a transition. For Dolores Cannon, the soul is in constant motion, and death is just another stage in this continuous process of evolution. When we begin to understand that there is intelligence in the cycles of life, we begin to face the end with less fear and more respect. Each gesture, each change, each sudden impulse may be linked to this invisible process of preparation. This doesn't mean living waiting for the end, but learning to notice the subtle language with which the soul expresses itself. Understanding that there is beauty even in the final moments, and that spiritual consciousness accompanies us until the last instant. This changes everything. It changes the way we deal with death and, especially, with life. Dolores Cannon never used these ideas to fuel fear or fantasy. Her approach was one of observation, listening, and respect. She saw in the reports a common basis that transcended cultures and borders, which gave even more strength to her conclusions. When we put together the 7 inexplicable behaviors that she identified, what we find is a discreet but profound portrait of the way the soul communicates with the body and with the world around it. Nothing is said directly, but everything is shown in a sensitive way. It's the invisible order manifesting through everyday life. And perhaps the greatest learning of all this is to value these moments, however small they may be, because it is in them that the soul leaves its final signature, silent and true, like a breath that remains even after departure. Accepting this view doesn't require any specific belief, just an openness to see the facts from another perspective. When we look carefully at these signs, we realize that they are not intended to scare us, but to prepare us. They are like whispers from the soul, warning that everything is okay, that the cycle is being fulfilled, that there is nothing out of place. Dolores Cannon reminds us that life is just one of the many stages of the journey of consciousness. Death, therefore, is not the end, but a passage. And the signs that precede this transition are ways of reconnecting with this truth. They invite us to look inward, to reflect on how we are living and what we are leaving behind. It is a subtle but powerful call to live with more presence and more intention. If we have come this far with these reflections, it is because there is within us the will to understand more deeply the cycles of existence. Dolores Cannon, with her careful and respectful work, offers us keys to look at life and death with different eyes. Knowing that the soul may be aware of its departure changes our way of dealing with losses and also with reunions. It helps us to better welcome the silences, the detachments, the gestures, without explanation. And above all, it allows us to better listen to each other. In an accelerated world, these subtle signs are invitations to slow down and observe. Because sometimes, in the middle of the rush, we forget that each moment lived can also be a farewell. And each farewell, however painful it may be, can carry within it a greater meaning. If this content has brought clarity or comfort to you, share it with someone who can also benefit from these reflections. This helps us to continue producing videos with themes that respect your sensitivity and your search for meaning. And if you are not yet subscribed, consider following the channel. Here, we seek to understand life more broadly, without exaggeration, with respect and depth. After all, we are all treading a path that sooner or later will lead us to big questions. And perhaps by walking together, these answers will begin to reveal themselves little by little, in the simple gestures, in the words spoken, and above all, in the silent listening of what dwells within us.